A country where you can be jailed for holding a blank sheet of paper, where the word war is a criminal offense punishable by 15 years in prison, where an opposition leader was poisoned with a military-grade nerve agent, and when he survived and returned, he was imprisoned and died in an Arctic penal colony, where an entire community has been classified as extremist simply for who they love, where more than 1,000 people are behind bars right now for nothing more than disagreeing with the government. This is not the Russia of the 1990s, chaotic but partially free. This is a state that has systematically dismantled every institution of civil society, criminalized every form of dissent, and turned the law itself into a weapon. This is Russia today. We base these videos on the analysis of different, real cases of people facing persecution in their home countries. We are country witness experts from London, focusing on human rights violations. We receive cases for analysis from major law firms who represent asylum seekers in the United Kingdom, United States, Canada, and European Union. Our goal is to prepare evidence-based assessments and expert witness reports for submission to court in asylum tribunals. Today, it is a story about Russia, a country that has seen one of the largest exoduses of its own citizens in modern history. More than 1 million people have left since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began. If you are an asylum seeker or a legal representative looking for a country expert witness, you will find a verified list of qualified professionals covering all major regions of the world via the link in the description below. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. Russia became an independent state. The 1990s were chaotic economic collapse, oligarchs, wars in Chechnya, but there was a degree of political pluralism. Independent media existed, opposition parties operated, courts had some independence. In 1999, Vladimir Putin became prime minister and then acting president. He promised stability. What he delivered was control. Between 2003 and 2008, independent television was shut down. Oligarchs who challenged the Kremlin were jailed or forced into exile. The Yukos affair sent a clear message. Power belongs to the state. 2011 and 2012, after widespread election fraud, hundreds of thousands of Russians took to the streets. The response was not reform, it was repression. The foreign agent law was introduced, designed to label any organization receiving foreign funding as a tool of hostile powers. It was the beginning of the end for independent civil society. 2014, Russia annexed Crimea and launched a covert war in eastern Ukraine. Western sanctions followed. Internally, the screws tightened further. Criticism of the annexation was treated as disloyalty. In 2020, Putin engineered a constitutional amendment allowing him to remain in power until 2036. That same year, opposition leader Alexei Navalny was poisoned with the nerve agent Novichok, a substance only produced in Russian military laboratories. And then came February 2022. Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Within days, new laws were passed criminalizing any public opposition to the war. The word war itself became illegal. The official term was special military operation. Calling it anything else could mean 15 years in prison. The systematic destruction of political opposition in Russia is not a side effect of the system. August 2020, Alexei Navalny was poisoned with Novichok. He survived, was treated in Germany, and in January 2021 chose to return to Russia. He was arrested at the airport. Within weeks, protests erupted across the country, the largest since 2011. More than 11,000 people were detained in just 2 weeks. In June 2021, Navalny's Anti-Corruption Foundation and his regional network were declared extremist organizations. Anyone who had ever donated, volunteered, or even shared their content became a potential criminal. In December 2021, Memorial, Russia's oldest and most respected human rights organization, founded by Andrei Sakharov, was forcibly liquidated by court order. After February 2022, the crackdown accelerated. More than 16,000 people were detained for anti-war protests. Over 700 criminal cases were opened under the new Discrediting the Armed Forces law. People were prosecuted for social media posts, for holding flowers near Ukrainian embassies, for wearing blue and yellow clothing. In February 2024, Alexei Navalny died in IK-3 Polar Wolf, a remote Arctic penal colony located 900 kilometers northeast of Moscow, 40 miles north of the Arctic Circle. He was 47 years old. The official Russian account: he felt unwell after a walk, lost consciousness, and could not be resuscitated. The preliminary cause, listed by prison staff, was sudden death syndrome. His body was withheld from his mother for a week. When it was finally returned, it was reported to bear bruises. In September 2025, Navalny's widow, Yulia Navalnaya, announced that independent laboratories in 2 countries had analyzed biological samples smuggled out of Russia and concluded that Navalny had been killed by poisoning. The Human Rights Foundation stated, his death at penal colony number 3 has now been confirmed by laboratory analysis to have resulted from poisoning. Navalnaya named Putin directly. I state that Vladimir Putin is guilty of murdering my husband. She did not name the labs.
The laboratories from the 2 countries have come to the conclusion that Alexei had been killed. To be specific, he had been poisoned.
However, the case of Alexei Navalny is not an isolated one. To date, hundreds and even thousands of political prisoners remain incarcerated in Russia. In 2025, OVD Info, Russia's leading independent human rights monitoring organization, had documented more than 1,000 political prisoners. Russian courts returned guilty verdicts in 99.6% of cases. There is no independent judiciary. There is no rule of law. Let me tell you about one case. The details have been anonymized, but the facts are drawn from a real asylum claim referred to our team by a law firm in London. Man I will call Dmitry was a mid-level professional in Moscow. When the invasion began, he attended an anti-war protest and shared his views on social media. In March 2022, he was detained for 15 days. His posts were flagged by the authorities. In April, a criminal case was opened against him under Article 207.3 of the Criminal Code, discrediting the armed forces, carrying a maximum sentence of 15 years. Dmitry fled through Georgia and eventually reached Europe. When our expert assessed his case, the finding was clear. Return to Russia would place him at serious risk of criminal prosecution, imprisonment, and torture in detention. His asylum application was granted. On February 24, 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It was the largest military offensive in Europe since the Second World War. Within days, new laws were enacted. Article 207.3 of the Criminal Code made it a crime to spread false information about the Russian armed forces, punishable by up to 15 years in prison. Article 280.3 criminalized discrediting the army. Even a social media post saying no to war could result in prosecution. In September 2022, Putin announced a partial mobilization. Officially, 300,000 men were called up. In practice, the mobilization was chaotic. Men were grabbed off the streets, pulled from workplaces, detained at metro stations. Ethnic minorities from Dagestan, Buryatia, and other non-Russian regions were disproportionately targeted. Reports documented that mobilization rates in these regions were several times higher than in Moscow or St. Petersburg. More than 700,000 Russians are estimated to have fled the country in the first weeks of mobilization alone. The total number who have left since February 2022 is estimated at over 1.1 million, the largest exodus from Russia since the Bolshevik Revolution. In December 2022, new amendments increased the punishment for voluntary surrender to up to 10 years in prison. Desertion now carries penalties of up to 15 years. Draft evasion is a criminal offense. Exit bans have been imposed on men of military age. Russia has become a country where the state can compel you to fight in a war, and where refusing to do so is a crime. For LGBTQ+ individuals, Russia has become one of the most dangerous countries in Europe. In 2013, Russia passed the so-called gay propaganda law, which banned any public expression of LGBTQ+ identity that could be seen by minors. In practice, it was used to suppress all visibility. In 2023, the Russian Supreme Court went further. It declared the international LGBT movement an extremist organization. This was not a ban on a specific group, it was a ban on an identity. Under this ruling, any expression of LGBTQ identity can be treated as evidence of participation in an extremist movement. A rainbow flag, a social media post, a conversation, any of these can be used as grounds for criminal prosecution. Since the ruling, prosecutions have risen sharply. In 2024, documented cases increased sixfold compared to the previous year. People have been charged for social media posts, for wearing rainbow symbols, for attending private gatherings. And then there is Chechnya. Since 2017, multiple waves of anti-gay purges have been documented. Men have been abducted, held in secret detention facilities, subjected to electrocution, beatings, and sexual violence. Some have been killed. The head of the Chechen Republic publicly stated that there are no gay people in Chechnya.
Это ерунда. У нас таких людей нету.
Not a single person has been prosecuted for these crimes. There is not a single organization, not a single lawyer, not a single government body anywhere in Russia that provides legal protection to LGBTQ+ people. There is no anti-discrimination law. There is no hate crime legislation. The state itself is the persecutor. Before the invasion, Russia still had pockets of independent journalism. Tvaya Gazeta, whose editor Dmitry Muratov won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021. Echo of Moscow, an independent radio station that had broadcast since 1990. TV Rain, the last independent television channel. Duza, The Insider, V-Times, digital outlets that investigated corruption and human rights abuses. And Memorial, the organization that had documented political repression since the Soviet era. Within months of the invasion, all of them were gone. Echo of Moscow was shut down permanently. Vaya Gazeta was forced to suspend publication. Its editor went into exile. TV Rain was forced abroad. Duza and The Insider were declared undesirable organizations, meaning anyone in Russia who cooperates with them faces criminal prosecution. Memorial had already been liquidated by court order. Committee to Protect Journalists documented at least 22 journalists in prison in Russia as of 2024. Reporters Without Borders ranked Russia 164th out of 180 countries for press freedom. More than 500 individuals and organizations have been designated foreign agents, a label that requires them to mark all their publications with a lengthy legal disclaimer, subjects them to constant audits, and effectively destroys their ability to function. More than 80 media outlets have been blocked or closed. Russia now has one of the most censored information environments in the world. The only sources of news available to most Russians are state-controlled channels that present the Kremlin's narrative without question. In 2017, Russia's Supreme Court banned Jehovah's Witnesses as an extremist organization. It was the largest ban on a religious group in modern European history. Since then, more than 800 criminal cases have been opened against believers. Over 150 people have been imprisoned. Their properties have been confiscated. Gathering for worship is treated as evidence of organizing an extremist cell. Reading the Bible in a group setting can lead to a prison sentence of up to 10 years. But it is not only Jehovah's Witnesses. Independent Islamic study groups are prosecuted as extremists. Members of Hizb ut-Tahrir, a political organization that is legal in most of Europe, face life imprisonment in Russia. After the annexation of Crimea, Crimean Tatars became a particular target. More than 200 Crimean Tatar political prisoners have been documented. Mosques are surveilled. Prayer outside state-approved structures is treated as grounds for suspicion. The pattern is consistent. Any form of religious practice that falls outside the control of the Russian Orthodox Church and the state-approved framework is treated not as a matter of conscience, but as a security threat. Can people escape persecution by moving to another part of Russia? The answer, for most of those at risk, is no. Russia is a centralized authoritarian state. The FSB operates in every single one of its 85 regions. Criminal cases are federal. They follow you across the country. Digital surveillance through the SORM system covers all telecommunications. There is no city, no town, no village where the security services do not reach. For political dissidents, a federal criminal case means there is nowhere to hide. For LGBTQ+ people, the extremist designation applies nationwide. Chechnya is the most dangerous, but no region offers legal protection. For draft evaders, military commissariats operate in every district. Digital registries track all men of eligible age. For Jehovah's Witnesses, the ban is federal. FSB raids on private homes have been documented across the entire country. For Crimean Tatars, persecution follows them from Crimea to the mainland. Internal relocation is not an alternative. It is an illusion. More than 1.1 million Russian citizens are estimated to have left the country since February 2022. It is the largest wave of immigration from Russia in over a century. Around 200,000 went to Georgia, more than 150,000 to Kazakhstan, over 100,000 to Turkey, tens of thousands to Armenia, Serbia, Montenegro, and the UAE. Many have since moved on to Western Europe. Across the European Union, around 80,000 asylum applications were filed by Russian citizens between 2022 and 2024, with Germany receiving the largest share. In the United States, the asylum grant rate for Russians has been approximately 55%. In Germany and France, around 45 to 50%. These numbers are rising as courts recognize the systematic nature of repression. Recognition rates tell the story. When judges in independent courtrooms apply legal standards to the evidence, they consistently find that people who flee Russia have a well-founded fear of persecution. Russia is a country where the government has criminalized dissent, destroyed independent media, banned an entire identity as extremist, imprisoned more than 1,000 political opponents, and compelled its citizens to fight in a war of aggression, punishing those who refuse. Freedom House rates Russia as not free, with a score of 16 out of 100, one of the lowest in Europe. This was an episode of the Human Rights, looking at the reasons that force people to flee their country. Thank you for watching. You can also check out our weekly news roundups on this channel. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.